That's a theme song. Check, please. Banana. Grapefruit. Kumquat.
Listing all the fruits.
Avocado. We're listing fruits.
Welcome back to The Great and Secret Knowledge, a speculative fiction podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Lindsay Nelson.
Hey, I'm one of your other co-hosts, Jeff Richardson.
And today we're going to venture for the first time outside of our inaugural topic, which was Piranesi. And we are going to talk about a landmark 90s through early 2000s TV show.
Celebrated.
The X-Files. Quite, I think, a revolutionary moment in television.
What'd you think? Like, were there no supernatural FBI shows before this?
I think the supernatural procedural, I think this is the first one. I think that, cool. I mean, I have not researched this, but this is the first one that I knew about, and I can't think of any that predate it. There were procedurals before. I mean, procedurals go back to the dawn of TV with, like, L.A. Law and Perry Mason and stuff, and they were supernatural shows. But I think this is the first, like, paranormal procedural combo, which we have gotten many since, but none that could match the greatness of the X-Files.
Just a remarkable achievement in television. I pulled up some info on the X-Files, if you'd like to hear it.
Absolutely.
It's just off of Wikipedia. In 1993, it first aired on Fox. I believe that was back when Fox was pretty new, right?
I mean, I was a child.
I was young.
My knowledge of network standing is not great.
I was 15. Oh, so Fox had been around a while. The Simpsons probably looked like they look now by that point.
Yeah. No, I mean, that is my previous sort of association with Fox before the X-Files was The Simpsons, so.
Yeah, and then it ran through to 2016. Duchovny came in and out for a bunch of them.
Mm-hmm. I have strong opinions about that.
Yes.
As you know. I don't remember if we talked about it in parts that we were recording, but...
Created by Chris Carter. Main stars are David Duchovny, Gillian Anderson, and Mitch Pileggi.
Goddess.
Oh, undoubtedly.
Yeah.
I don't know what all I've seen her in. Hannibal, of course, as the therapist. Was tremendous.
Yeah, Sex Education. What is it? The Fall? Or was it The Top of the Lake? Anyways, she is just an incredible actress. Sexy beyond belief.
Oh,
like, I don't know how that woman gets sexier every decade, but she truly does. I thought, but Gillian Anderson and Dana Scully, very early formative crushes for me.
Yes.
And you think, right, seeing her in that, you're like, this woman can't get any more alluring and, like, stunning than this. And nope, every decade she gets hotter. I don't know how she does it. Gillian Anderson, truly a gift to us all.
And then going back to the pilot, like we're doing, she's like a little cherub.
She's like a baby.
Like a little squirrel.
Yeah, she's got that like sweet round like face because she's so young. Yeah, but beautiful then, beautiful now, but somehow gets hotter every decade. I don't know.
Amazing.
Also very baby-faced David Duchovny.
Oh, forget about it. Oh, hell yeah. Duchovny.
Obviously not as strong of feelings as I have about Gillian Anderson, but he's also very cute and charming, and their chemistry is legendary, so.
Oh my God. There's a moment in this episode where he is like, he's perfectly professional and like, but also like a good friend to somebody he's only hung out with for a few hours at this point, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe a day or two.
I mean, the way that this relationship builds, and I really think, I mean, there's some of it in the writing, but I really think a lot of it had to do with the actors and like their, connection. It's just so, one of my first ships ever, and, a relationship I aspired to when I thought I was still straight. But I think because for like a male-female relationship partnership, it is so built on respect. Like, they come to respect each other pretty quickly, even when they don't agree with each other. There's still a clear level of respect, and way before they ever get romantic vibes, they value each other as, like, friends and, partners and, like, team members to an extent that just made, when it did get it all like romantic, it just had such a foundation of respect and appreciation for the person that you rarely see portrayed in like heterosexual relationships. So
yeah, it's interesting when you don't let them get together for a long time, you get to see something that should be common, but at least then wasn't. Man and a woman working together, loving each other, supporting each other, but not necessarily
respecting
dating.
each other, trusting each other, but not having it be romantic necessarily. And yeah, revolutionary show, like we talked about, for a lot of reasons, but one of them just is in this pilot, our first scene with the two of them in Mulder's office, and we get this introduction to these characters. Scully is a revelation. There was not a character like Scully before, in that she is occupying what would be a lot of the traditional male traits. Doesn't take anything away from the femininity of her character, but she's the skeptic. She's the analytical one. She's the cold, rational one. Mulder is embodying a lot of, especially in the early 90s, what would be considered much more feminine traits of intuition, belief, emotional response. Like, he is the emotional, intuitive things that are culturally much more feminine coded, and definitely were in the early 90s.
Yeah, of all the cop shows, like, he was one of the few cops that would like get down on the level with the ordinary person. And
yeah, no, he's usually the one connecting
listen.
with the like witness or the victim. Scully is analyzing evidence, and he's the one forming the like emotional bonds. He's the one using his charm to persuade people. You never see Scully do that, like, which I responded to a lot as like a 12-year-old watching this show.
He's also he comes off really sweet with ordinary people. With people in power, he gets kind of strident and annoying.
Mm-hmm.
Private school, entitled kind of vibe.
Yeah, no, he has like a smarmy, cocky edge too, but with regular people, he's usually very... And this is because I definitely think comes from his backstory of being somebody who had this formative, traumatic incident that changed his whole life with his sister, and was never listened to, was never believed, was always dismissed. So whenever he's talking to like a victim or a witness or like he is demonstrably like open to listening to them. I kind of swallowed the word open there. He is demonstrably open to listening to them, and you can tell, like, ready to believe them. Yeah. So they pick up on that fact that he is like taking them seriously in a way that, he would have wanted to be taken seriously and never has been.
Hell yeah. So this show is created by Chris Carter and some other folks. Do you know anything about Carter, his other work?
No, I mean, like Millennium or like, I was a big Chris Carter fan, so I watched all of his stuff that existed at the time because of X-Files. So admit that I have not kept up with him because I got so mad at what he did to X-Files. But, so I don't know what he's been doing lately, if he's been doing anything lately.
He did the feature film, I Want to Believe, that America said no to, but that I thought was really cool.
I mean, like, I still went and saw it in theaters, but...
His Lone Gunman series had an episode about planes being flown into the World Trade Center that was airing that week, and so they had to
I watched the Lone Gunman series, so yeah. Big fan of the Lone Gunman.
Yeah, so I don't think he did a lot after the Lone Gunman in 2001.
Yeah, like I said, I didn't hear about anything else. I probably still would have checked it out, but I was not avidly checking as much as I would have been pre.
Well, so anyway, he made a great show here, but it was
he made a masterpiece. Like, we can't really. Yeah, he might have kind of spoiled it too at some point, but
like it wasn't quite a perfectly crafted like super arc thing. I mean, it was a little lumpy in points, but you had to make 22 of these every year. At least.
Well, and that's part of, like, the old TV schedule was, I think, 24 episodes, was like a regular TV run season. And this show actually is also the first place I ever heard the term, and again, I don't know if they pre-existed this, but this is the first place I ever heard people using the terms of, like, mythology episode and monster of the week episode, which have become common media terms to talk about shows, especially like this, because there are the overarching story episodes, which are the mythology episodes, the ones that go to the, like, internal
your black oil
mysteries of the show.
Ice pick guy.
Your black oil, your ice pick guy, obviously, who we get introduced to in this very first episode, the cigarette smoking man, who is like going to be the antagonist for basically the whole show. But the ones leading from, like, the basic idea that aliens have come to this planet and the government knows about it and is hiding it for some reason. A mission statement that we get in, like, the first 15 minutes of this episode. Which will continue to be the, like, overarching mythology stories of the, like, ongoing plot. But interspersed with that, because, like you're saying, you have 20 plus episodes a season, are the Monster of the Week episodes. The, is there a Loch Ness Monster creature here? The... is this serial killer actually some kind of weird entity that hibernates, eats people's livers, and then hibernates for a decade?
Sexy vampires.
Sexy vampires. Goofy vampires.
Tapeworm guy.
Is this doll possessed?
Fuck, this show rules.
I love this show so much.
So we're covering the pilot this week.
Yeah.
And it says this aired September 10th, 1993. I don't think I was hip to this show until later. In fact, I was so freaked out by the merest idea of this show that I put it off for years until some, like, karaoke friends invited me over to watch it with them. And they just happened to be watching Home, one of the most disturbing episodes of television.
I was going to say, the worst onboarding episode for X-Files I can possibly think of.
So I waited a bit after that.
Especially if the reason you weren't watching it is because you were at all scared or disturbed by it. Home is like,
too scary.
Do not start anybody at home. People have to be hard into the show before you can spring home on them.
Yeah, so I have to give credit to Kumail Nanjiani and his X-Files podcast for getting me into it. Because, like, he'd tell you if the next one's real scary or whatever. And I'd be like, okay, I'm ready. All the lights are on, you know. So that was my X-Files experience.
Yeah. See, me, a tiny, tween, unsolved mystery and unexplained phenomenon nerd, was on this show from the jump.
Oh, that's awesome.
I was watching this show. My mom actually heard about it, I think, when, like, the second or third episode was airing. So I could catch up on, like, reruns and get into it within the first season still. So
that's so cool.
Yeah, I loved it.
Wow.
But I was like a tween who wrote a very early GeoCities page about unexplained UFO sightings with very dramatic language. Man, I don't know if that's still findable anywhere. I don't even remember what the URL is.
That sounds awesome, and I need to see it.
Now I kind of want to see if I can find it.
UFO
or was it
sightings?
Angel Fire? Was it old enough that it was... I can't... Yeah, it was descriptions of like 4 different UFO sightings.
That's so cool. I was just talking to a friend of mine who saw a UFO with me in the 90s. I was listening to a podcast with Dave Foley, and they came on last podcast on the left, and he said he had a new podcast about UFOs and stuff, and then he started describing his experience, and it was like almost the same, except his was during the day, and ours was at night. And the weirdest thing about it, I think, was that my friends either never spoke of it again or waited 20 years to
talk about
Me
it.
and Jason, like...
That is kind of weird.
I tried to bring it up with another one of them, and he just never responded.
Really? Oh, yeah. That is a very X-Files type thing.
Uh-huh.
We get, people not remembering their alien encounters. Again, a lot of precedent set up in this pilot for things that are going to be ongoing throughout the show.
They were throwing so much. Like when he spray paints the ground, I'm thinking, yeah, that way you'll know kind of where the boundary is, where stuff happens. Or if it happens in multiple locations, then maybe you can triangulate.
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant.
And then the scene where when the car shuts down and they lose time, it's like right on the...
It's
right
raining,
past the
he's
X.
all excited. Woo-hoo!
And he's like jumping around in the rain, and Scully is like, what the hell is happening? Stop doing mysterious things and not cluing me in on it.
So that's the pilot, and we'll get into the specifics here in a second. And we could talk more about season 1 and 2 in our next episode. I thought maybe we could cover 2 in one episode, unless this happens and we feel like there's too much to pack into one episode. But
yeah, I think we could probably talk about 2 in one episode, because in this one we're talking about the pilot, but also just kind of the show as a whole and its cultural impact and everything. For the next one, we've both picked like a favorite episode. And because Jeff picked a mythology episode, I picked a Monster of the Week episode, so we could get kind of a look at both kinds of episodes. But yeah, I think those will probably be in the same episode.
This show's so good.
It's so good.
Okay. I'm going to leave behind that. I'll just shrink that. Excuse me. I have the... If something, I'm just letting it run in the background in case it sparks anything, but with the sound off and the captions on.
You're just letting the episode run in the background?
I'm going to like scrub if there's something I have in my notes that seems relevant. So right at the start, there's not the recognizable theme song that we're used to. It's just kind of this tinkly ambient thing.
Yeah, no, we don't get the iconic opening credits.
I was like, when are they coming? Is this like a cold open? What's going on? And there's a thing that comes up. It says, the following story is inspired by actual documented accounts. And then we're in some trees. We're in Oregon, the Collum National Forest.
Young woman in a nightdress running through the woods.
I think she has red hair. Is that right? Or light brown?
I think it's like auburn. Yeah.
And then along comes some weirdo creep. He's surrounded by this wind spiral. The lady runs into him, or he grabs her or something. And
so no, you just see light over so she falls and there's wind, like a vortex around her. And then she looks up and there's light coming through the trees and you see the silhouette of a person.
Okay. But then the light goes whoosh, and it's just her there.
Then it's just her in the leaves.
And this person says, Dr. Scully, can you ID these marks? Or no, it's the part in the beginning. It's Karen Swenson, dead woman, class of 89. And the guy goes, "It's happening again, isn't it?"
Yeah. So this is the next day. She's like, was left there in the leaves, and it's the next day, and the cops and coroner are there. And yeah, the detective identifies her. And he's like, "Is that a positive ID?" And he goes, "She was in my son's class." And then that's when he goes,
Yes.
"Was that the class of 89 or whatever?" And he goes, "It's happening again, isn't it?" So it's not the first person who's been found mysteriously dead in the woods we're getting.
Oh, spooky. So then we get Agent Dana Scully, and she is walking into work, and she looks like in control. And I noticed there's a moment where a guy kind of like passes over her shoulder, but she doesn't move out of her lane. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, that's a clear signal. She's a boss.
Well, and there's no way to work in an environment this male dominated and not do things like assert your space. If you are ever going to be treated as an equal in that environment, you can't move for men. And yeah. But I can't even imagine what being a woman in the FBI in the early 90s would have been like. But she's braced for it. She heads into an office with 3 mysterious guys in suits. One who's not talking to her and just standing and smoking a cigarette in the corner. And
yeah,
glimpse.
I put mean Roger Ebert is her boss, and smoking creeper is there.
Does kind of look like Roger Ebert. But so yeah, there's two guys sitting behind the desk, and they're talking to her, and they're basically going over her history with the FBI and her credentials, saying that she originally finished medical school, but instead of going on to residency and practice as a doctor, she joined the FBI. Why did she do that? And she's like, well, I was recruited out of medical school, and my parents considered it a rebellion that I joined the FBI instead of. And then to your clearly a boss, she finishes with, but I saw the FBI as a way to distinguish myself.
Yeah.
So feeling like being a doctor was not singular enough for Dana Scully. She wanted to be in an environment where she could break ground as a woman.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Let's see. They ask her to describe what she knows about Fox Mulder.
Yeah, they're like, have you ever heard of the agent Fox Mulder? And she's like, by reputation.
Yeah. Oxford-educated psychologist. He did the profile of Monty Propps in 1998. I assume Monty comes back at some point.
I don't think so.
Oh, okay. I thought maybe.
Because I'm pretty sure, I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure that's a reference to an actual serial killer.
Oh, that's fun.
But he wrote a monograph on serial killers and the occult that helped catch Monty Propps.
That's right.
We get, it is a good way to info dump at the beginning of this episode, because it totally makes sense in the scene, in the context, to be giving us their resumes. But it is giving us their resumes so that we know where both of them is coming from. And right away we get the difference of she went to medical school, she undergrad in physics, she is like a science, procedure, logic, evidentiary based through and through, and Mulder's credentials are all kind of emotional based, right? Like they are, it's psychology, it's a science, it's a discipline, but it is a much more intuitive, emotional, malleable discipline than something like physics or medicine.
It's interesting. I like this contrast because she doesn't have a nickname, unless, doctor is a nickname, I guess.
It's a title, it's not a nickname.
Whereas he is spooky, which is kind of, I don't know, emotion adjacent.
Yeah, again, intuition, like belief, all of those are kind of his hallmarks. But yes, he not only wrote, like, his breakthrough moment of getting a bunch of career success was writing about serial killers and the paranormal, or the occult, but then got used that fame to go into the unexplained, sort of discarded, paranormal, possibly we can't find a reasonable explanation for these cases, called the X-Files.
We get to see his just funny office, these wild posters,
little basement.
I feel like I thought it was messier than it actually is. It's really just his inbox is a little overstuffed.
It's that it's clutter. It's like
Yeah.
It's very crammed because this was not meant to be. I think we've just come from the upstairs rooms, which are like properly officey, and she's squeezing past filing cabinets and stuff to get in there. So I think more than messy, it's like cramped.
Yeah.
And I think that gives this impression of like disorder and chaos more than it actually is a mess. It's just cramped.
So he thinks she's sent to spy on him.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, no. And then he's like, and somehow she's like, tell me my resume again. And he's like, you're a medical doctor. You taught at the academy, undergrad physics. You did a paper on Einstein's twin paradox and like how she could do it better or something.
That was Einstein's twin paradox theory, a new perspective. And he's
right.
like, that's pretty... Talk about credentials, rewriting Einstein. And she's like, did you even bother to read it? And he's like, actually, I did. I thought it was pretty good. But in the cases I study, the laws of physics rarely seem to apply.
Yes. Oh, that's a great quote. Then he jumps right into the case. And he says Oregon wrong. He says Oregon. They do this all the time on television. It's fine.
Yeah, I mean...
He shows her the two distinct red marks, asks her to ID them. She throws out some, I don't know,
possible
speculation.
Explanations from what you can see in a picture.
She thought maybe, and he shows her like a molecule diagram.
He shows her a series of bodies from different places that were all found with no discernible cause of death, because that's a big part of it. Like, autopsies could not find any cause of death. External, accidental, natural causes, anything. But they all had the two marks on their back, and this compound was found in the tissue around the marks. And he's like, Dr. Scully, can you identify this compound? And he puts up the chemistry symbol, like, breakdown of what the substance is. And she's like, it's organic, but other than that, I don't recognize it.
I think she said, is it a synthetic protein?
Yeah.
And isn't that opposite of organic? Or is organic meaning it's part of a living
organism?
Tissue?
It comes from a living organism. You can have a synthetically made...
Oh, this is fascinating. It's synthetic, but it's organic. I love it. It was seen in her.
But, I mean, organic is the category, not like
right.
And synthetic is that it is a artificially created one, but the category it falls into is organic compounds.
Yeah. So and it was her death, and then two others, one in South Dakota, one in Texas, and then he's like, clearly it's aliens, right? And she's like, nah, I don't think it's aliens. But I'd have to see all this stuff. And then he's like, that's why they put the I in FBI. And it's like, let's rock. It was his funny out the door line.
But I think this scene, their whole initial meeting in the office, their exchange, they're very like quick fire, intellectual. You get a sense for both of their brains. He's much more sort of like performative in the way that he's talking. He's got a lot more intonation and stuff. She's very like straight ahead, but you get some incredible quotes that I think stay with it. You get, I was under the impression that you were sent to spy on me, where he does the little sing song at the end, but also where he's like, can we not, when all like scientific explanations be exhausted, not then turn towards the fantastical as a plausibility? And she's like, the only thing I find fantastical is the suggestion that there are any answers outside of the realm of science. And just you get this incredible, again, like, battle of wits, but where they do kind of immediately have some respect for each other, So there's a lot of, it's much more antagonistic here at the beginning, and especially because Mulder is correct in that she was sent to kind of spy on him and debunk his work, and she knows that that's and is inherently uncomfortable with what she was sent there to do. So, there's a lot of tension between them immediately, but there's also like a rapport right away as well.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to see it all over again.
Yeah.
And now I get to think of like little Lindsay going, "Oh, look at them. They're going to be friends."
I wasn't a chipmunk, but other than that, that's pretty accurate.
Forgive me, I wasn't there.
No, that's okay. You have no idea what the register of my voice would have been. That just sounded like I recorded an album with Alvin, so...
Oh, man. So, yeah, after he says that funny line, we jump into the next scene, and they're flying to Oregon. And they hit some heavy turbulence. Mulder is just straight chilling through the whole thing.
Yeah, she's going over case files, and he's just napping in, like, 3 seats, which... God, do you remember the days when you could get on an elevator, an airplane, and nobody else would be in your row, and you could
that is absurd.
Doesn't happen anymore, but I do remember it happening back then.
Oh my God. Let's see. The FBI got involved, didn't find anything. Then they shelved the case. Oh, I like that they show him take a plane, then they're driving. It gives you the sense that like they're going somewhere a decent ways away from the airport.
But also the fact that when they hit turbulence as they start to descend, and Mulder goes, "This must be the place," which is the beginning of him making annoying references to something that he will not talk to her about. He will not tell her, but he's clearly noting things. He has a theory, clearly, and he's, like, excited about stuff that he feels validates that, but he won't. Yeah.
I thought he was
it's
just
like when
saying,
the car...
I think we're arriving, but
no, it's like with the car radio goes
to the weird
crazy,
stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, he figured that one out.
It was the first of him noting instances that he feels support his theory. So
love it. So yeah, he tells her that the FBI did get involved. They didn't find anything, so they shelved the case until he found
enjoyed some salmon and then went home.
Yeah.
We get him being snarky right away, because he's like, they came down here and enjoyed the local salmon, with which a twist of lemon is just to die for.
Just to die for. And he says what, like, pardon the expression? Something like that?
Yeah.
Oh, man. So this is where the car hits some weirdness. The radio gets all fritzy. Is this when the light blows out?
No, that doesn't happen until the second time.
Okay.
The radio gets fritzy, like it makes weird sounds, and then the car peters out, like the engine goes off, and they kind of coast to a stop. And that's when he jumps out of the car, opens the trunk, gets a can of spray paint out of the trunk, and then sprays an X on the road. And this is again another in his clearly, like, theory, mission-oriented actions that he will not tell Scully what he's doing, and she's already being driven crazy by the fact that she's like, "What's that? What's happening? Tell me what's going on. What do you?" He's like, "You're not ready for my theory."
Oh, man. Yeah, the look on her face as he's spray painting is just like, what have I got myself into?
Yeah,
you know?
What is this madman doing? You can clearly see her waffling between, like, this guy's a lunatic and this guy's holding out on me, and can't decide which one annoys her more. Like, she is infuriated by both of them, both possibilities.
She's like, what the hell was that about? Probably nothing.
So then they head in.
Let's see. They meet the locals at the graveyard.
Yes, he's mentioned that they're going to exhume the bodies because she noticed reading over the files in the plane that the first 3 instances of this where the coroner didn't report the marks or anything unusual was a different coroner, and the marks and stuff didn't start getting reported until there was a new medical examiner. And so he's like, yep, so we're going to check out the other bodies and see if the marks are there too. Same ones who died in the same way, but without the same evidence. So they go to the cemetery and they dig up.
cop or a medical examiner. And then fucking Greatest American Hero shows up. Fucking this guy with the hair. And his daughter is trying to like get him to be like, come back, Dad, don't make a scene. And he's like, screw it, I'm making his scene.
Because this is the medical examiner who did not note down the marks and stuff in his reports, and he's insulted that they are digging up a body with the implication that he missed something or covered something up.
And this is Dr. J. Nemen. He's all defensive. He thinks Mulder's accusing him of something.
Well, the implication of exhuming the body is that you missed evidence. You either concealed evidence or you missed it. That's the only reasons to dig up the body.
But you missed it. All that means is it's going to take a little more work to solve the case.
But it is an insult. It's an attack on your professional skill. And part of the defensiveness...
To some new evidence, some new thing he didn't know about. I feel like he went from 0 to 11 pretty fast.
No, because for two reasons. One, when this happens in law enforcement, it throws every previous case you have ever contributed evidence to into question. You can get appeals on cases that have been closed decades ago if there is evidence that a medical examiner was being either intentionally, hiding evidence or being neglectful. So it can ruin your whole career. There's a reason to get mad about it if you think you didn't do anything wrong. But also, this guy did intentionally not put information into the reports. So he is also reacting at an 11 because he knows that they're going to find stuff if they dig it up. Because they all in the town know about it. They know, I mean, how much they know varies, and we never get a full lowdown on how much this guy knows, but he knows that he didn't put stuff in the report. So he knows that they will find stuff if they dig up the bodies.
What I like about that is it's a good way of showing us what ordinary people going through UFO shit are having to deal with before Mulder ever gets there, like emotionally.
Right. Because the case doesn't get to the FBI until it's been going on for a while.
Because it's not like he swapped the body with a chimp, right? There was some weird sci-fi shit happening.
Yeah,
if I remember correctly.
That the aliens were doing to them genetically mutated their bodies. That's what the synthetic protein is.
Yeah.
I'm assuming, based on the rest of the show, that what they were trying to do was create a human-alien hybrid, and it was killing them.
Oh, so cool.
That is never an arrived at conclusion in this episode. You do get the fact that the bodies get turned into something that looks much more like a little gray alien than a human after a few years. And that there was something about the testing with the marks and the organic compound that was killing them. But I'm assuming they were trying to mix alien and human DNA and make a human-alien hybrid based on the rest of the show. But
that's a great theory. Yeah.
Like a lot of things in X-Files, we never find out a lot of the details for sure.
Mulder again gets the last word as that guy fucks off. He goes, "Guy obviously needed a longer vacation."
Again, with the snark. He is the queen of snark. Sarcasm drips from everything he says.
Yeah. So this is Ray Soames, the third victim. He was accused of the murder of the other two. Supposedly he died of exposure. And Mulder says, "How does a 20-year-old die of exposure on a warm summer night in Oregon, Dr. Scully?"
And this is while the casket is coming out of the ground. And we get a close-up on the belt that is the straps around the coffin ripping.
Terrible
So
timing.
as it's being lifted out, it falls and tumbles down the side of the hill until it hits a gravestone and it falls open. And then everybody sees at once the sort of strange mummified monkey gray alien looking corpse that's in there instead of this guy that he was just talking about.
Gray alien monkey. What
Mummy.
if that's all it was an alien monkey?
I mean, Scully's theory is that it was some kind of primate before,
Yeah.
when she's doing the autopsy.
And then, of course, Mulder says it's probably a safe bet. Ray Soames never made the varsity basketball team.
Because he always has to get a last quip in.
Zing. So they do an autopsy
and
of
then
the
he yells at
creature.
everybody to seal it up.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, he gets all like, top secret.
Well, and also I don't think he wants it contaminated, but it's, yes, both top secret and close it up, get it out of here, we need to go analyze it. And then he is giddy as a schoolboy in the autopsy room, running around taking a bunch of pictures while Scully is trying to do her autopsy and getting very annoyed at his antics.
Mm-hmm. Could you get the flash out of my face? If it's not alien, what is it? And that's when she's like, it's probably an orangutan.
Small orangutan.
It seemed like Scully didn't want to do more tests, but Mulder's like, we got to do x-rays.
I mean, I don't know that it was that she did. She's going through the regular procedures of an autopsy. And Mulder, who has, again, this is Mulder working from an assumption the whole time. So this is just bad science, I mean, which obviously is not his, but, like, in that he, this whole time, has been working from the preconceived notion that it is alien abductions, right? Like, that's what he believes before he ever sets foot on the ground. So he wants to jump to the things that are going to find the evidence that he wants to back up his theories. And Scully, who doesn't believe in aliens, is just trying to do her job in the way that she's supposed to do her job. She's trying to do an autopsy with the correct procedural steps. And he's like, it's an alien. Do x-rays.
Oh, they got an implant. Didn't they get an implant?
Yes. So when they do x-rays, that's what I said. They find a metal, something in his sinus cavity. Yeah. And she pulls it out, and it's a little metal bar.
That was so exciting. When I saw this, I had read tons of books and stuff about people's abduction stories. And some of them did have implants, but they were always of like different sizes. They weren't standard.
Mm-hmm. Well, and through the course of this show, we will see several different versions of implants that look differently. This one, obviously. But this is the thing, is that people have had random bits of metal in them from stuff, from different, whatever. So, like, in the actual, real Unsolved Mysteries abduction story cases, they're not going to be standardized. This is a fictional narrative in which we are building to a source for all of this.
Right. They're making choices about what's actually happening.
Yeah.
I like to pretend that it's just like 100 different species of interdimensional people, most of whom are assholes, and they're doing shit, just checking it out.
And also, like, different kinds of implants could serve different functions. Because even in this show, we will get more than this one kind of implant. Yeah. We will see this implant again. We will see it more than once. But we will also see different types of implants. This will be the main one, though. This is set up right here for...
I like that she claims not to be all fussed about the exam. And then as soon as she gets rid of him, she goes back to looking at the x-ray. Mm-hmm. So it's like she's getting a taste of the weird stuff. She's getting into it.
Well, she is also an investigator and a person who wants to figure out what's going on. She's genuinely trying to solve all of these cases. She is trying to bring a realistic, critical eye to it, but she wants to solve it too. Like, she's also an FBI agent. And she's a medical doctor, so she's, her curiosity is engaged and she wants to figure out what's going on. And unlike Mulder, she's not coming in with preconceived notions of what it is. So you have to look a lot harder when you're not just looking for evidence that supports your already derived theory.
Absolutely. You got to work through that bias. I mean, that's why science is so boring compared to how it is on shows and stuff. Because it has to be done a certain way or it will be valueless in the broader scientific
You should
scheme.
never start from a... I mean, a lot of times an idea is what gets you to start a series of experiments. So it's hard, but you're need to collect data, gather it, and draw conclusions based on it, not find pieces of information that seem to support a preconceived theory.
Yeah. Next, they go to a mental hospital. I can't remember what takes them there.
So they're talking about the other kids in this class who are still alive and around.
This is the class of 89.
This is the class of 89. The girl who we saw in the cold open who died in the woods was being treated at this hospital.
Oh,
so they're
right.
talking to the doctor about her and her case and saying that she was, psychotic. It seemed like she had a traumatic event that was causing PTSD, but no recollection of anything specific, whatever. And Mulder's like, did you try hypnosis? And he's like, no, I didn't try the thing that's not real. Like, he doesn't say that, but his tone of voice absolutely says, no, I did not treat her with hypnosis. You quack.
Hypnosis, the thing that is not real. It really, in almost all the sort of outsider literature, hypnosis is seen, or at least was seen, as a sort of panacea for getting to the truth. Mm-hmm. John Mack used it a ton with the abduction scenarios. It was his studies were kind of based on that. It's why Harvard tried to get rid of him, because they said it wasn't scientific enough.
Well, it's not. I mean, this is the thing where this show is dated in this respect of how much they refer to and use hypnosis, because we have basically proven in a modern context that hypnosis is not a useful tool for recovering memories. You put somebody in a suggestive state and their brain is going to hook on to whatever you are suggesting, that you are not helping them uncover memories. You are implanting memories. This was a huge part of the Satanic Panic. That a bunch of these kids, when put under hypnosis, would get the hint of suggestions of what they were supposed to have experienced, and their brain would fill in the gaps. Some of this was done with kids in a perfectly lucid state, but you're talking about little kids who want to please authority figures and are picking up on the hints that the adults are putting down of what they should be saying. But we have conclusively proven that, regression hypnosis doesn't really work when you put a brain in a suggestible state. Whatever memories are quote-unquote recovered will be things that were suggested to the brain in that state. But in the 90s, it was still considered possibly a very viable method of recovering.
I once saw a documentary about a woman with multiple personality disorder, or DID, and she was convinced, her future doctor was convinced, that the person who treated her first essentially
created some
messed
of
her
the
up so
alternate,
much that she had 13 new different personalities after being treated, which you'd hopefully want to find a way to integrate. But anyway, the suggestion there was that was made through the therapeutic process rather than uncovering.
Because again, you're talking about hypnotic regression to kind of uncover all the alters, and instead was creating other alternate personalities. So
yeah, and also conspiracy theorists used the stories a lot to weave together. Like David Icke was a master of this, of just taking all the raw data from these hypnosis regression things and weaving them into a narrative where a pizza place can be a pedophile factory or whatever,
Right. This is the thing about, on a lot of the alien abduction stories, when you are putting somebody into a regressive state and then you are asking them about, so you were on a road and you saw a light, we have a cultural narrative about those stories that your brain is going to fill in, even if the hypnotist isn't either intentionally or unintentionally kind of implanting those ideas. But so I side with the the psychiatrist is clearly not doing a great job at this mental hospital otherwise, but I am with him on his disdain of Mulder's suggestion.
What do you want this poor guy to do? Billy Miles is walking in the middle of the night. Spoiler alert, kids. How's this guy supposed to anticipate
Keep
this crazy shit.
better track of your patients if you don't know that they're getting up and walking around when they're supposed to be in a permanent coma, vegetative state, or, you know, wheelchair bound, but only some of the time. Like, and I mean, plenty of people who use wheelchairs aren't actually complete, you know, they use them as a supportive device and are not like, but this person who is supposedly not capable of standing and walking.
Yeah, she was only known as confined to the wheelchair. Yeah. And we see a moment where she falls down and can't walk. Yeah. Oh, man.
So in this conversation about her treatment, the body that they're here to investigate, he talks about, you know, how you treated other people with this, and it's basically find out that a couple of her classmates, when these are all people in the same graduating class who've been mysteriously dying in the woods, a couple of her classmates were also permanent residents being treated for the past 4 years at this institution. So that's when they go in to meet them, and we meet Billy for the first time, who is the persistent vegetative coma, and the young woman we were just talking about, who is confined to a wheelchair, Peggy. And she's reading to Billy when they come in. And this is where
Mulder's
we see...
all sweet.
I was going to say, we see Mulder when he's talking to somebody who he empathizes with. We get his victim witness, like, persuasion, charm, warmth, you know, when he's talking to Peggy in a very different way than we've heard him talk to anybody else so far. He gets down on, like, to make eye contact with her. He's talking to her like she is a competent, you know, mentally cogent person when nobody else is talking to her like that. So
yeah, I imagine she doesn't get a lot of that being a patient in a permanent institution like that, or indefinite, however long she's there. So it's really interesting that he goes from being super sweet to coldly manipulating her into a painful situation so that he can sneak a peek at her bumps.
So he takes advantage of an opportunity, but he is not the one that sets her off. Scully is the one that sets her off. He says
to the doctor, he goes, let's get a full report on her. I thought that was like a ploy to get her to be upset.
Oh, I mean, I don't think so. I think he was just saying we need to examine her. I don't think he was predicting everything that was going to happen. He wanted to check for the bumps, but he was like, we need to get a full, like, physical exam. And then she flips out and falls out of the chair, starts bleeding from her nose. But not from impact, from, like, just a spontaneous nosebleed at the same time that she's freaking out. And then when she falls out of the chair, he goes over, and instead of assisting the nurse who's trying to get her back in the chair, he pulls up her shirt to check her back for the marks and sees the marks. And then as soon as he sees the marks, just walks away. So, like, they're still struggling to get her back.
He's an opportunist in this moment.
Yes. I don't think he was intentionally crafting that scenario, but I think he took advantage of the moment in a very, like... And he did turn dispassionately to be like, get a medical exam on her after he was just talking to her like she was a person, you know?
Yeah. What's I going to say?
Now that we're talking about it, about him taking full advantage of the opportunity that presented itself when she...
Let me see here. So because she freaked out, the reason she freaked out, maybe just exams in general freak her out because of her experience?
I mean, I definitely think that there's an implication of, I mean, they all present with PTSD, but with no causal event. Like, that's when they're discussing their cases as this, you know, psychotic breaks and stuff like that. So, yeah, they've all been experimented on multiple times against their will. And then she's been treated as a patient who doesn't comprehend what's going on around her. So I'm sure that hasn't helped anything. But so yes, I do think it's meant to be a trigger of the abduction experience when he was like, we need to get a full physical exam.
Okay, so that's solved. I just thought he was being a jerk. Okay, good. Mulder is redeemed. But yeah, he does. I mean,
he's
really
not being a jerk.
Split.
But yeah, but I don't think he was planning on what happened to happen. He just seized on the opportunity when it did. Because that's all he really wanted to know was...
Yeah. And now Scully does give him this look when that happens. And he is just like... Or, I mean, she's disgusted.
Well, but also she's struck by the fact that the marks aren't there, right?
And she thinks he's hiding something from her.
Well, this goes in the whole thing of him acting on a theory that he's not telling her about, right? So he's taking these actions. He's not thoroughly investigating every possibility. He's taking actions like we're talking about specifically based on his assumption of what's happening. And he's only looking for corroborating evidence, right? So she's like, how did you know the marks were there? Talk to me. You aren't telling me anything. You clearly think something specific is happening. What is this specific thing you think is happening? You know? So yes, that's out in the hall. And she's like, how did you know those marks would be there?
Yeah, I think they go down the stairs or something, and he's like, alien abduction, essentially. And she is so not into it. She is just certain it's something non-alien.
Well, he certainly hasn't presented any compelling evidence to anyone but somebody who's already bought into that idea that it is aliens.
Yeah. And Scully says, how did she get there? What were those kids doing in the forest? Smash cut to the forest. They're walking around. It's nighttime. It's real spooky. They're looking for clues. And she finds this weird circle of ash.
Yeah.
Did you have a theory what this weird circle of ash was?
I mean, this is the spot where the whirlwind keeps picking up and where they're basically, I'm assuming, being taken up into the craft by the light. So I assume that it's some kind of...
I thought it was smaller, so I thought it was like maybe a landing gear or something. I didn't realize it was the center of the vortex.
My interpretation was it's the middle of it's wherever whatever beam is both like paralyzing them and bringing them up or whatever is hitting the ground, was my assumption.
That's cool. In all my UFO study, I don't remember weird ash, but I'm sure it's there if they put it in the story.
I mean, also, this is a fictional story. Well, it's being inspired by, like, accounts of stuff. But, yeah, I mean, there's definitely some landing site stuff, like changes in Earth and whatever.
Yeah.
But so they're there, they're looking at it, and all of a sudden we see a bright light, like we saw in the cold open, over the trees. Mm-hmm. And we see a silhouette again. But this time, it is the detective, and it's the headlights
spooky guy
car.
With a shotgun, headlights of his Rambler or whatever. Scully's like, FBI, motherfucker, and he tells him to split. They don't want to, and finally they give up and they pass under the crime scene tape. But it made me think, how did she go in a huge circle and end up right near their car? You know what I mean? Like, they could have just walked off the forest like 10 feet or whatever. It was right there. You know what I mean?
I mean, I think that they were looking around. We didn't see the direction they came into the woods. When we cut to the scene, they're already walking around the woods.
Okay.
So they're checking out the woods for stuff. So it makes sense that they're kind of, wandering around.
It's always the last place you look.
So we didn't see them arrive there. We don't know that they didn't just come from the 10 feet where the car is parked, and then just spread out and are searching the area.
Cool. Okay. Let me take a quick break. I gotta get some water and stuff, and I'll be here right back. So one of them thinks maybe these folks are in a cult. Like somehow they're all working together. Mulder drives a little while, sees the compass as being weird. Light flashes. The car died. They lost 9 minutes. And Mulder is ecstatic. The rain's pouring down, and he's like, woohoo, we lost 9 minutes.
And then he gets equally excited or re-excited when he sees that it is just past the X that he marked.
Yeah.
When the radio got weird and the car died the first time. When they didn't lose time that time. This is where there's also a flash of light. So, like, the radio gets weird. There's a flash of light. They wake up with the car stopped on the road, and they've lost 9 minutes, and it's on the X, and Scully's like, tell me what the hell you think is happening.
Time can't disappear. It's a universal invariant. After that, she's writing a report. The light goes out. So she runs a bath.
They've got candles going because the storm has knocked out power.
Of course. Got the candle, got the robe, basic 90s underwear.
Very 90s underwear. And then when she's getting, like, ready to get in the bath, she's taking off the robe and she feels bumps down in the same place that these marks have been, and freaks out, understandably, because the only people we've seen with these marks are dead or severely incapacitated in a mental hospital. So
yeah, she
runs over to Mulder's room. He's there in, like, a white undershirt with a candle, looking all disheveled, and she's like, I need to show you something. And he's like, okay. And then it cuts to them inside with her, like, turning around and taking down the robe again and being, like, gesturing to her back and being like, what do you see? What's there? Tell me what, is it the... And then Mulder's taking his own sweet time about it. I mean, I do guess he wants to, verify for sure what they are, but he gets down, touches her back, he's taking her time, she's freaking out, and he's takes him a minute.
I gotta say, he looked a little horny there, but he was very professional. He didn't say anything creepy.
He's very professional, but as we've established, Gillian Anderson / Dana Scully, a goddess, and Mulder, as we will get into in this show later on in other episodes, like, a deeply horny man. So
yeah.
Like,
yeah, I love their hug. She stays with him.
He tells her it's mosquito bites. In a wave of relief, she, pulls the robe back on and hugs him. And then they stay. They have their first real bonding moment and, like, actually communicating with each other instead of sort of sparring with each other. Viewing each other as adversaries. They have the first moment of, like, connecting and viewing each other as people instead of adversaries.
Yeah. So he talks about how his sister disappeared. No one would talk about it, which I just got to say right there, parents that don't talk about their dead kids, it always fucks the kids up. Like, they did that to Donald Trump when his sister died. Like, nobody ever talked about her again. I think it happened in the Bush family.
I mean, it was, lots of people, but yes, I forget there's this really good child grief counseling house, like, organization in San Francisco, and one of their rules is before they will, because they have, like, a huge waiting list because they have an incredibly good reputation and, like, high rate of helping kids, cope with their grief and stuff. But one of their rules is they won't even accept them for consideration as a patient if you haven't told them the truth about what happened. Like, because they're very big on the idea that you have to be able to talk about it. Processing it means talking about it. We will use, they use age-appropriate language for the kids, but, like, they won't let you lie about not only if they're dead, but how they died, if they committed suicide, if they were murdered, if it was natural causes. The kid needs to understand it to the capacity that a kid at that age can and be able to talk about it, because that's the only way you move through your grief. When you do something like this, which has been more of the sort of standard with little kids, is like, oh, they can't really understand it, so we just won't talk about it. You end up with Fox Mulder, which is not a healthy human being.
Definitely obsessive.
You end up with someone who's obsessed and can't ever get over it because they never worked through the grief at the time because you wouldn't talk about it.
So then he talks about how he found the X-Files, and he says, there's classified government information I've been trying to access, but someone has been blocking my attempts to get at it. And to me, that was like, oh, this is the mission statement for the arc, the show mythology.
Mm-hmm.
He says something about how he has friends in Congress.
Yeah, that's the only reason he's been allowed to continue his work. But the big thing that we get here, which we talked about kind of at the beginning of the episode, is the big, like, premise for the show. Aliens are real. They've been coming to Earth and messing with human beings for various reasons. The government knows about it, and, for some reason, is actively covering up that information. So, at this point, and for a lot of the show, we don't know any of the whys, or the what exactly they're trying to achieve. But the big hook of the show is that aliens are real, they're screwing with people, and the government is actively concealing the fact that that's happening.
Yeah, and he says something about Scully's a part of that architecture.
Yeah, you're a part of that agenda.
And she's like, I just want to know how to solve this.
Like, I'm here just like you, trying to solve it.
He talks about doing hypnosis with Dr. Fritz Werber. Or Heights Werber. And we talked a bit about hypnosis earlier.
Yes.
How it's not all it's cracked up to be.
So not a reliable way to retrieve suppressed memories.
And then someone calls and says Peggy Odell is dead. She ran in front of a truck, which is odd because everyone thought she couldn't walk.
Yes, but the voice is a female voice on the line, and all it says is Peggy Odell is dead. So they go and they get to the scene, and they find that she has been hit by a truck in the road, and she shouldn't have been able to walk according to their understanding of her condition. So
Scully notices her watch stopped at like 9 something.
Which was the same time that they lost time.
Yeah.
In the car. So the same time that there was a flash and their car stopped and they lost time was the same time that she was running on the road getting hit by a truck. And then she's examining the body when Mulder comes running over and goes, the lab was broken into and the corpse is missing and the stuff was messed with. So they gotta go. And then they get back to their hotel and their hotel is set on fire. So everything else that they took from the autopsy scene, she's like, well, there goes my computer. So her computer that she's been taking notes on, his pictures, the x-rays, as far as we know at this point in the episode, everything, all of the evidence from the autopsy of the weird orangutan alien mummy body is gone, is lost. And so they're back at
Needless to say,
square
Mulder
one.
is tripping.
He is losing it. He is not coping gracefully with this. Because he thought he finally had tangible proof in his hands. And then it's all getting erased. And then while they're there watching their hotel burn, the girl that we saw earlier with her dad, the medical examiner, comes up to them and introduces herself. And we get the idea that she was the person on the phone. And is like, you guys have to protect me.
Yeah.
And they're like, what? And she's like, I don't want to die. You have to protect me. So they go to a diner. Which happens a lot in this show. There's a lot of, and it's partially that idea of like, there's not safe places to interview them, right? When it's a government conspiracy. You can't take them to your office. I mean, they're field agents, so you don't have that. Their hotel room just burned down. Mulder's phone is getting bugged. Like, you know, it's, you have to do something like take them to a coffee shop because you can't assure that any space that you could like take them to the police station and talk to them, you know, in an interrogation room isn't going to be interfered with. So they're at a coffee shop, a diner, whatever. And she talks about how she doesn't want to die like all of her friends, but she just wakes up and finds herself in the woods and she doesn't know how she got there and she doesn't know why she's there. But that's what happened to all of her friends before. One time they just died when they were doing that. And she talks about how it all started when they were having like a party in the woods to celebrate graduation. And then now they'll all find themselves there and then...
Yeah, her dad, the medical examiner, he told her not to tell anyone about it.
Because he thinks he can protect her, but she's still waking up in the woods, so she doesn't believe it.
She's like, this guy ain't shit. And then she gets a bloody nose. Dad comes in and is super pushy.
Mm-hmm. And also the detective comes in, and this is where they find out that he's...
Shotgun guy is Detective Miles.
Detective Miles and is Billy's dad.
Yeah.
And this is where, like, Mulder leaps to the fact that Billy's doing it. Because, like,
oh my god.
So she's saying, like, they know, they talked earlier about they know who the killer is, and Mulder's like, they know something, and then this is where Mulder's like, it's Billy. Billy is the one who's taking them out to the woods. And
I'm thinking he doesn't tell her exactly until they go to the other two graves, and they just happen to be real close to each other, so we can get them in the same shot.
Oh yeah, no, that's
and
right.
They're professionally
they go after
opened by a backhoe or something.
Yeah, after the daughter gets reclaimed by her medical examiner father and the detective, that's when they're like, they know they're covering up. We got to check out the other bodies. So they go to the graveyard, still raining, still the middle of the night, with flashlights. I don't know, they're planning on exhuming whole graves with, I don't see shovels or anything, but
whoever did it was incredible. There's no, I think the pile of dirt was like real small, if there even was one. It would be enormous.
We see the first one that they opened, like we were earlier in the episode, and then they're looking around, and there are two other graves, like you're saying, very conveniently close by.
That's just a common thing on TV, I think, because they don't have time
bury all
to
these kids in the same area.
Yeah, they don't have time to make it look homemade or whatever.
And those graves are empty.
Empty, yes, freshly emptied. And then Mulder says he knows who killed everyone. Billy Miles. Scully says vegetable, which I wasn't crazy about, but I guess was the nomenclature.
I mean, it was kind of, it's not cool, but it is still, and we get a joke from the nurse coming up that is horrendous, but
questionable.
The show kind of portrays it as horrendous, at least. Whereas Scully just saying the vegetable is not portrayed in the same way as the nurse's very tasteless joke. But they go to the mental institution, and Mulder is interviewing the nurse.
Before you get there, Mulder does explain his theory that he thinks Billy was controlled by another force during those 9 minutes. Which, this kid gets around. Apparently he's able to get from the mental hospital to the back 40, and then back in 9 minutes. I couldn't get the geography.
And we never get a clear layout of this.
We have no idea.
I mean, those woods could be just in the back of the mental institution.
Right.
We don't know. We never get a timeline when they're moving between places of how long it took them or where they're going or whatever. So the geography is very unclear. But Peggy was running across the road when she got hit by the truck. So that could have been.
What if they just stand up and take a step and they've dimension doored into
I don't think that's what's happening. Because there would be no need for the aliens to call them to a specific spot in the woods if that was the case. They are traversing land. They are being summoned to this spot that the ship can come pick them up. And if they could zap places or interdimensionally travel, that wouldn't be necessary.
Well, I just got to say 9 minutes was a too short amount of time for you to get past every orderly station and the night nurse and get all the way out of the building, all the way to the fucking rainforest and back. It seems a little not enough time. Unless they go at super speed or teleport or astrally travel. But it's not astral travel because he's got mud on his dang feet.
Right. And this is one thing that I think, again, this hospital does not seem to be the best, because not only are they not noticing, which if there's aliens freezing time, but that's the thing, again, if they're freezing time, if they're missing time, freezing time, we don't know what they're doing that's causing that it could be a time freeze situation where but anyways, they're not noticing that their patients are leaving. They're not noticing that this guy, for somebody in supposedly a persistent vegetative state, has some pretty good muscle definition still, when his muscles should all be atrophied. And yes, he has dirty feet. So
now it's before everything was computerized. So nowadays, if things were disconnected for 9 minutes, it would be...
Oh, sure. There would be security cameras.
Plenty of
and
evidence.
Doors would be all logged when they're open to a controlled ward and stuff like that. So there would be a lot more evidence that something was happening, or a lot more evidence that stuff had been removed,
Yeah. So I kind of like the idea that they are outside of time for a while, which makes it easy to get out of the hospital and across town.
Go wherever, and if it's time is frozen for that period. But they're interviewing
apparently
the nurse.
It wasn't frozen for that truck. You know, that...
Well, again, we don't know what period of, like, it's luring them out of the hospital. We don't know when the time freeze starts, right? Because they're still moving, or the missing time, the memory time. It seems to coincide with the light. They're heading to the woods before the light happens. So whatever is, like, summoning their implants and stuff like that, or getting Billy to do it, that's before the missing time happens.
Oh. Wow. Fascinating. Okay.
So they're still traveling and sneaking out. People's memories are being messed with, so there's clearly something, you know. But the nurse is like, nope, I would know if anything was happening with him, if he was doing anything. I'm the one who takes care of him. I, like, change his bedpan every day. Like, there's nothing. He blinks and I know about it. And this is where she makes a joke about, and they ask about Peggy, and she says, not my... not my section of the produce aisle, which is deeply
nuts.
Deeply awful, but, like, yes. So,
you
and
would hope a nurse would be more respectful than that.
Well, I mean, I get that it gets hard and you get jaded and there's, you know, but whatever. It's not cool. Anyways, Mulder is interviewing her about, like, what she was doing at 9, and she's, like, watching TV, and he's like, do you remember what was on or whatever? And she basically is figuring out that she has missing time, or she has time that she doesn't remember clearly. At the same time that Scully is examining his body and is not finding anything until she gets to his feet. And then his feet are muddy, and she digs under his toenail and finds some of the same ashy ground that she collected in the woods. And she flips out the minute that she finds it and storms out while Mulder's still talking, like, strides into the hall, and he is like, what? And she's like, this is the same earth that I had. He was doing it. He was walking. He was taking them out to the woods. He's somehow moving, like, all this kind of stuff. And she's like, that's the same earth as the earth I collected from the woods. And he's like, well, let's run compare the samples, run an analysis on them. And she's like, we can't. It was in the hotel room. It burned with all of the other evidence. And it's him. I know it's him. And Mulder's like, stop, slow down, think. And he's like, but this is what you've been saying. And he's like, I know, but you're the one who has to write it down. You're the one who has to put it in a report. And she's like, you're right. We're going to go back out to the woods.
Back to the woods.
We're going to get a new sample. We'll compare the samples before we do anything else.
They see Detective Miles is parked there. They hear a woman scream, so they start running through the trees. And then Scully gets knocked out by someone. Looked like a shovel, but I'm not sure.
It's the detective.
Oh, it's the detective. Okay.
Yeah, it's with the butt of his rifle. Shotgun. Whatever. I'm not a gun person.
So Mulder runs after someone screaming.
And he runs into the clearing.
Yeah, Miles cocks his weapon at him. And that's when Mulder tells him he knows it's Billy.
And then they hear her scream again, and he's like, he's gonna kill her. And so they, like, run into the clearing, and then he sees Billy, and he tries to, who is, like, on top of her in the leaves, like, he tries to talk to him, and he doesn't respond, so he points the gun at him, and then Mulder tackles him so that he doesn't shoot his son. And then, because Mulder wants evidence more than he cares about, like...
I was shocked to see that the dad had the I don't know what you call it, the fortitude to kill his own son.
I mean, this is a person who is in law enforcement, so we have to say that ostensibly at some point, and we've made our feelings about law enforcement pretty clear on this show, but, like, ostensibly if somebody became a small town cop or whatever, like, they did it because they believed to a certain extent in, like, law and order or whatever, and they've been actively hiding this. They haven't known that it's aliens, they haven't known that it's whatever, but they have been actively concealing that this is happening. He's been letting a bunch of kids die because he knows his son's involved and they aren't sure exactly what's going on and whatever. So at this point, the guilt is getting to, when he's face to face with it, he's been able to push it aside and deny it when he can pretend that, like, what they know is happening can't possibly be happening, you know. But when his son is literally there in a clearing in his pajama bottoms, like, attacking a woman, it seems, he's like, I can't let this keep happening. And you can see that in the moment. It's shot well, it's acted well. Like, you can see him having this moment of, like, I can't let this keep happening, and points the gun at him. Mulder tackles him so that he doesn't kill evidence, and also, I don't think he thinks it's going to solve anything, and then there's the blinding flash of light.
We see the marks on Billy. Scully sees the light from a distance.
She's
again.
over the ridge. Yeah. She's like, because this is like down in a little hollow, this spot. And I will say, because this has been a major complaint about the show, we'll talk about it right now, that lots of people I know have, like, Joss Whedon famously uses this as an example of stuff, and, like, Joss Whedon also, but, is that it gets frustrating how Scully still refuses to believe in the face of seeing a bunch of weird shit happen, right? And I will say, for the first couple of seasons, they're very good about making sure that situationally she is not seeing the weirdest part of the shit, right? Like, she is always just over the ridge or has been knocked out or whatever. So everything she's seen is weird and inconclusive and mysterious, but she hasn't, like, seen an alien levitate people up or whatever. Like, Mulder keeps seeing the actual, like, money shots of the weirdness, right? Like,
frustrating.
She is
Mulder is the one that's frustrated. Like, come on!
He's like, why are you always in the other room when this happens? Why? Yeah, it's just like, why am I always in the other room when this happens? I want to, know too. So, yeah, she's over the ridge. She sees the light, but she doesn't see anything else. Mulder sees the whirlwind. He sees Billy, like, picking her up. And then in 1 minute, you can see that the marks are on his back. And then after the big flash,
bumps are gone.
The bumps are gone.
The lady is conscious on the ground.
And
Mulder
Billy
runs and... Oh, go ahead.
Is himself again. He speaks. He recognizes his dad.
Yeah. So Mulder runs over and finds Scully. He's all excited. But I thought it was strange that he didn't check on the girl.
Nobody does.
The young woman.
It is this thing where they just, like, all give up on her when she came to them asking for help and protection. And I mean, they did, I guess, ostensibly. She's not dead.
Oh,
and
that
the
was
danger
Teresa?
Is past. That was Teresa.
Couldn't even tell who that was. Oh my God.
That was Teresa.
Awkward.
So she's fine, but nobody's ensuring that at this point because, I mean, I get it from Billy's dad. His son has just recognized him again for the first time in 5 years.
Yeah.
And seems to be himself again. And we as the audience have seen the bumps disappear, so we assume that the problem is over. And that,
it's like they want to focus on that,
anymore.
And so they either didn't include the other thing or, like, edited it out.
Right, and so when he's hugging his son, and Mulder sees that everybody seems to be alive, and the aliens are gone, because the light's gone, then he's like, oh shit, I should see what happened to Scully, because she was hit in the head with a rifle butt, or whatever.
Oh my God. That guy's getting off scot-free, I bet.
Yeah, he is, and he has, like, assaulted multiple people. They've all, like, criminal conspiracy, like, conspired to withhold evidence. So,
Word.
I mean, at least him and the medical examiner. We don't know if any of the other parents are involved, but we know that it's at least those two guys.
So next, the FBI is interviewing her. Mulder's in the room. Interviewing Billy, excuse me. And he seems like kind of, I don't know, weirdly off.
Well, he's been hypnotized now.
Yeah, okay.
The guy talking to him, again, this is Mulder's in charge now. So Mulder's brought in a hypnotist.
Oh my
and
God.
He's in an interrogation room. They're at the local police station still. They brought him back.
Oh, okay.
And they're getting a statement because the cop and the medical examiner are there too. And Scully's in the other room on the other side of the, like, one-way glass. But there's, like, a hypnotist, psychotherapist, whatever, interviewing Billy and getting his whole story about when they were all out there in the woods. The light took them to the testing place. It would summon him. It would tell him to get the others. It would bring him to the testing place. They would get tests. The tests were going wrong.
Yeah, why were they killing them?
Because he said that. He said the tests were going wrong and they wanted to cover it up.
Oh.
So that's why they were testing on them for years, and then when stuff would go wrong, they've now decided that they all need to die because it's evidence of their meddling and it's not achieving the results that they wanted, so they're gonna like clean up the evidence.
Why did they take this whole Byzantine method? Why didn't they just double tap them in the middle of the night?
I don't know what the restrictions of the aliens are or
they
the
could
machinations.
Just hire some goons. Goons are a dime a dozen.
They can freeze time, right? Or either
maybe these are the goons they hired and they're just bad at it.
They're just bad at it. They can either erase memories or freeze time or do something that messes with our perception of time. So you think that they would have ample opportunity to take them all out, not this one at a time. But you do get the impression that they're still like experimenting on them, and as they fail, they kill them. But again,
studying them as their body falls apart, sort of Tuskegee Syphilis Institute.
Because this has happened over the course of years. So
it's so fucked up.
Yeah. So, but now they're done. They're gone. And then we cut from the scene of them, the hypnotherapist, like interviewing Billy and recording it, to Scully sitting in an office back at the FBI.
Yeah, mean Roger Ebert's there, smoking man whispers at him.
And he's basically, she's telling them the report of what happened and what he said and whatever.
And he's like, it's whack, there's no evidence. And then that's when she whips out the implant.
Yeah, which, as far as we know, at this point, even Mulder didn't know she still had.
That's pretty baller.
Because he would not have let her take it in there if he knew that she still had it. So she has kept it. She's like, he was like, you have no evidence. There's no, how are we supposed to? And she's like, look, I'm just telling you what happened and what people said. Like, my report did not surmise any fear, like, explanation. I'm just telling you what all happened. And he's like, but how would we prosecute something like this? Because he says, like, no evidence of issue or no cause. And she was like, crimes were committed. And he's like, yeah, but how would you prosecute a case like this? There's no evidence. And that's when she puts the implant on the desk and is like, this is the metal I took out of his nose. It was in my pocket, so it didn't get destroyed with everything else. I had it tested. Its material cannot be identified. Yeah. Meaning this metal is not known. Whatever this is made of is an unknown substance that, as far as we know, doesn't exist. So, she leaves it on the desk. She leaves that as her closer, and she walks out. And then they nod at the cigarette smoking man, and he takes it. And then
she's walking down the hall. He passes her
into the office as she's leaving it.
That night she can't sleep. There's this great shot of like the blinds across her face. And
her looking at her digital clock and it clicking over to the next.
Mulder calls and he's like, they fucked us. There's no case file. The paperwork's all gone. And we see the smoking man walk into this hallway with all these filing cabinets, finds a special case.
It's real Raiders of the Lost Ark moment. He pulls out an evidence box. There's like a lucite container with compartments.
It looks like pre-made to hold implants.
It's yes, it is. I mean, this is again the thing that they know. They know. At least, again, we don't know how involved they are, but we know that they've been actively at least covering this up for a while. So it is, there's a little case, a little lucite case who slides out, and there's like 4 previous little evidence jars numbered in there that have the exact same implant in them. He puts this one in as well, closes up the little box, puts it back in the evidence box and slides it home, and then walks out in a real Raiders of the Lost Ark moment where you see all the stacks and stacks and stacks of evidence, and then he exits through a door which he relocks with a little security card, and you see that it's the Pentagon.
The Pentagon.
There's a little Pentagon evacuation plan on the door. Know your exits, it says.
Yeah.
So this is where we get
to the credits.
Yes, the government is actively concealing whatever's happening, whatever information. And credits, and that is the first episode of The X-Files.
Oh, man. Got more of that plonky ambient music. There's also this weird, like, whiny grinding noise. That was a lot of fun. And then I was like, did they not write a full theme because it was the pilot? and then I skip to the next episode, and yeah, that's absolutely what it was.
A lot of times that kind of stuff won't exist in a pilot, because when you're writing a pilot, you don't, even when you're filming a pilot, you don't know that the show is going to be picked up.
Right.
Pilots are how networks, particularly in the past, in the time when this was made, there's a thing in LA called pilot season, where every show that might be made is in consideration for being made, shoots a pilot as like a proof of concept. And then a bunch of people watch the pilot, and if they like it, then they order a full run of the show. But putting money into things like developing a title and a theme and everything isn't going to happen if you don't know for sure if the show's going anywhere. So lots of times in more modern stuff, they will remake the pilot if the show gets greenlit to change stuff like that. But back in the day that this was made, they would just air the pilot because they'd already filmed it, you know? They would just air the pilot, and then anything new would start being implemented when they had the full season order and would pick it up from there. Sometimes pilots are reshot because people are recast and stuff like that. Like somebody who was just as
Babylon
like a placeholder. 5. Babylon 5, Firefly, like there's a lot of it that happens. Sometimes you will get somebody in just to like try and sell the pilot. Like in Schitt's Creek, Catherine O'Hara, because obviously David Levy and Eugene Levy goes way back with Catherine O'Hara, David Levy's father, goes way back with Catherine O'Hara. They've co-starred in a ton of stuff together. They asked Catherine O'Hara to film the pilot of Schitt's Creek as a favor to help get it sold. And then she had so much fun with the script. She wasn't supposed to play Moira Rose if the show got picked up. But she was just supposed to be a favor shooting the pilot to help it get sold. And then she liked it so much and enjoyed the script so much that she was like, no, I want to play her.
That's awesome.
And it got picked up. So, yeah. Sometimes
amazing.
She's incredible. Catherine O'Hara. I just watched Beetlejuice because at the time that we're recording this, the Beetlejuice sequel is about to come out. So I just watched Beetlejuice to like refresh on it before watching the new one. And yes, Catherine O'Hara is incredible. She's amazing. She owns every scene that she's in.
Absolutely. So for this episode, do you have any other thoughts, overall opinions?
I mean, I think it's a strong start. Like I said, obviously it sold the series.
Yeah.
It does set up a remarkable amount of what will be future story relevant. Like, you wouldn't necessarily think that so much of the mythology stuff would be planted here, and I have no idea how far out they'd planned at this point, you know, or whether they were just good at, because people will again, we'll talk about The Simpsons, but people will say that, like, The Simpsons, how meticulously they're crafting something that they'll base an episode years later off of, and they're like, no, we rewatch old stuff for ideas.
Yeah.
Like, we did not 4D chess that. We were not planning 7 seasons ago to plant the seeds for this. We just watched the show for seeds of stuff that might make a good episode on its own, you know?
Yeah, that's how most shows work that have more than one writer, right? Like, and a lot of times if a show has one writer, it gets a little samey. So if you're going to have 20 plus episodes.
Well, we don't really make TV like that anymore. So the way that, like, a show is just indefinitely, like, you know, picked up and renewed, now a lot more stuff is planned out.
Yeah.
But it's only stuff like Grey's Anatomy or whatever that's literally been running for 20 plus seasons. I think everybody forgets about. It's like how people would not realize how long Supernatural had been on the air before, when it was still on the air. So that model is happening less and less, of a show that can just run an indefinite amount of seasons. Now with like streaming and the whole peak TV era and stuff, although we're going through a big shakeup of that again, it's more that you would plan out the whole arc of a show, or at least like there would be an assumed 3 seasons and you plan out the story for 3 seasons. And then if it's really popular, they'll pick it up again.
It's basically whatever the streamer tells you have
Yeah.
leash. You're like, you probably want to tie up 80% of these threads.
A lot of time now stories will be more shaped around that, but back in this day, part of the whole like concept, and this is still a thing, but it's much less of a thing, of a TV show was that you wanted to be able to reset at every episode end, right? Like that's a thing. I mean, this is bigger in sitcoms than it is in dramas, but it's still a concept of like, because you had no idea how long the show was going to run for. You hoped it would run for a really long time, right? You would hope it keeps getting renewed. So you don't necessarily have a concrete plan, like something, you know, didn't start out with like, this is going to be 7 seasons and this is going to be the arc and it's going to go from here to here, right? You just kind of are building as you go and trying to make something that kind of resets itself to a certain degree at the end of every episode so you can have the next episode and it doesn't.
Right.
You know.
They can't get famous. They can't become the director of the FBI or like be killed. You know, there's all these things that have to be like undone. Because if somebody had this many successful cases at any level of law enforcement, like they'd be advanced, whereas these two...
Well, but they don't often solve things in any way that can be like prosecuted, right? So they often eliminate the danger. They solve things for the people directly involved, right?
But they can't prosecute somebody.
But they don't close cases in a way that could be recorded and acknowledged. You can't usually prosecute the people that they find responsible if they even survive to the end of it, you know, so it wouldn't be...
Yeah, they kill a lot of monsters.
They kill a lot of monsters. They scare a lot of people away.
One of them goes to prison and comes back in a later episode.
No, there is definitely people that they, like, classically arrest, right? Yeah. Like, and there's people like Toombs who...
That's who I'm thinking of.
Right, like, is supernatural, but is also apparently a dude who you can, like, prosecute in a traditional sense, even if you can't convince people that the reason he was killing people was to eat their livers and hibernate, right? Like, you can still say, this is a dude, here is his driver's license, here are the bodies of the people he killed, we can send him to jail, you know? Yeah. Instead of, like, it's a lake monster. Or whatever.
Oh, fuck, I love the lake monster.
So yeah, but they usually fix the problem. Some people get away quite a lot too, especially in the big conspiracy stuff. But they usually...
that guy Krychek, or Ice Pick Man.
They usually make people safe, or they resolve the condition, but they don't like have a lot of documentable successes. You know, they don't send a lot of people to jail. They don't.
I mean, the damn smoking man keeps hiding all the evidence or whatever.
I mean, it's true, but that's part of what makes it a good show engine, right? Because they are, when you're working against a vast conspiracy, you can have episode level successes that still don't really move you forward because your work is constantly being undermined by the conspiracy. So it's a good show engine. It's a smart one. And the fact that they establish in the beginning in this episode that like they are a misbegotten like stepchild, you know, like they are shoved aside, they are not given funding and resources. It's, you know, like it's not an important part of the bureau. Nobody's going to make a career doing this. You're not going to move up through the ranks or whatever. That it lets them kind of get away with being a little unsupervised at the same time that they are actively being very supervised by the conspiracy.
Yeah, there are people that take over the office and hold them back. Yeah, there's always different things that keep them from achieving their goals. But then there's also somebody making sure neither of them are assassinated, which is very not like real
and
life.
This is stuff that we find out later in the show, that we have competing interests in here, because in the very next episode we meet another major character who is Deep Throat. Yeah. And this is somebody who is tipping Mulder off, is helping him. I mean, that's the first time Mulder sees him too. We've got like Mulder's friend in Congress and stuff like that, but we find out by the second episode, which is that there is people in the conspiracy trying to help them because they want the conspiracy exposed, but they can only help them so much without giving themselves away, and they need to stay within the conspiracy but they're double agenting, right? So like we get this set up right away that there is a fairly good justifiable show reason why people are alternately helping them and hurting them, right? Because there's conflicting motivations. There's people who want the conspiracy exposed, but they can't expose themselves. They need it to be gradual enough that, like, you know, you're building enough, or whatever. Like, there's competing interests. You've got a web of, this is like anything in, like, spy setups and stuff too, which is very similar to conspiracy stuff, is that you've got a lot of competing interests. You've got people who will alternatively help them and hurt them depending on what, like, their current goal is or whatever. So it's some pretty good motivation. Like I said, they keep this going pretty well for about 5 seasons of this tension of, like, making it seem believable that they are both getting somewhere and not getting anywhere. And once they start actually getting concrete answers about the conspiracy is sort of when the show kind of falls apart. Yeah. Like, and like we talked about, I think it was for other reasons than the fact that they actually started to reveal some stuff about the conspiracy. But I think that probably didn't help, right? Because at the same time that they were trying to deal with, a bunch of their original writers' contracts expired and left the show. So you're dealing with new writers who didn't build this world and these characters and don't understand them on the same level. You've got the whole thing with David Duchovny wanting to do other things, but then caving to the money and coming back for only some of the shows, which, again, as we've talked about, made them have to come up with really ridiculous scenarios to have him both be there and not be there, right? And it just didn't work. It would have been much better if he'd either just stayed or completely gone. Because then they could kill him off or whatever, and the show could maybe find its footing again, but trying to keep it in this in-between stage means I feel like the show never really found its footing again after that point. There was still some good episodes, but it never
did have
had
Annabeth
the same...
Gish, who is a fun lady. Good
She's
character.
great. Yeah, love her. But, like, it just never clicked in again in the same way after that period. Yeah. So, and part of it was they did kind of, in the movie, have a little bit too much concrete, you know, conspiracy.
Yeah, the bees.
Well,
the
and they find that came all of the yeah, like I was gonna say, this is, and that is when you hit the point where Scully no longer has plausible deniability, right? Like, so, and I do like that they stopped trying to force it at that point. But that is the point where, like, Scully can no longer deny. And then you do lose part of the show engine because part of it is the tension between their two opposing viewpoints. And when you don't have that anymore, and it makes sense because she's not a dumb person. She's a very smart person. You can't go into an alien spacecraft and see all the, like, comatose stasis bodies that they're, like, without being like, okay.
Yeah.
This is happening. But, you know... Like I said, there was a bunch of factors playing in that post the first movie really kind of wrecked.
Plus they get together, which is always hard for a show. I mean, if it was Star Trek, you'd have all these other characters to, like, work with.
Right.
It's just the two of them. And so changing that for any reason is, destabilizing. Yeah. Eventually. Yeah. So there's a bunch of reasons that it kind of unraveled. It went on for seasons after it started unraveling, though. Yeah.
But, and then we got into the whole Scully can't die thing, which was a little bit, because, like, death passes her by. Like, I don't know if you remember any of that. But
I've only seen those later seasons once.
Yeah, me too. I haven't. But so in Clyde Buckman's Final Repose, which is still in the good stuff.
I love that one, yeah.
But it's such a good episode. It was one that I seriously considered being my pick for favorite episode pick. But he is a psychic who can see how everybody's going to die. Like, that's his one specific psychic skill, is he can see everybody's death. He can talk to you, and he can know exactly when and how and where you're going to die. And he keeps telling everybody whether they want it or not, right? And then when he's in protective custody with Scully, and they're, like, playing cards and talking about it, and he's like, you really don't want to know. And she's like, no, look, every story about a prophecy or, like, a predestination means that, like, knowing about it brings it into being, right? So, like, Hamlet, Oedipus, Macbeth, like, if you don't know what your destiny is, you can't enact it. Knowing about it drives you inevitably towards it, and I don't want to do, you know. So he's like, okay, fine. And then later, when he's dying, spoiler alert, I guess,
for his final repose.
For the final repose. And she's like, saying, like, how do I die? And he says, you don't. And so that was the first planting. Now, that could just be a throwaway line, right? But they revisit it in several episodes later on. There's one episode where, like, has literal death in it, and if he looks at you, you die. And he tells Scully to look away. Like, death tells her to look away, or like a representative of death. We don't get the full details on whether he like is the death or just like a death or whatever. But anyways, he actively tells her to look away and basically spares her and like that she's going to keep living. And from that point, there's an implication in the show. It's referenced in a couple other episodes by a couple other things that Scully like cannot die at this point.
Okay. I think I need to watch this show again.
She's like the Captain Jack from Doctor Who, where, you know, after Rose brings him back.
I see. For a second, I was like, oh, she can't die because she's a Catholic and she believes in heaven. And so she'll be alive, you know, in the kingdom of heaven or whatever. I didn't realize it was, you literally cannot die until the show is canceled.
I mean, they gave her like in canon plot armor, right?
Yeah.
So like they're like, all this stuff is happening with Mulder. We need to make sure that everybody knows you're not going anywhere. So they picked up, like I said, Clyde Buckman's final repose is the first time it's mentioned, but that could have been a throwaway, right? That could have been like him just saying that wasn't necessarily. But then it was that episode with like a guy who is death. And if you look at him, you die. And he told her to look away. And then after that, they bring up several times that like Scully can't die. No, they don't test. I mean, nobody like stabs her in the heart and she like a vampire just continues on or whatever.
I want to see that episode. Or
that doesn't.
But honestly, like season 11 would have just been her like in a persistent vegetative state for 100 years, you know, because like they never said anything about she will be healthy and active.
No, that was never part of the pronunciation. It was, you cannot die. So yes, she could get to the point where her body is completely falling apart and she can't die because she didn't look at death. Like, so.
She's just locked in forever.
It'll just be her and that snail at the end of the universe.
Oh man, everything's dusty. Have you seen Westworld, the TV show?
Yeah. I mean, I've only seen the first 2 seasons.
Oh, okay. There's a moment after that where like a guy wakes up and just everything is dust. It's been like so long.
Years. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that this is an incredible, groundbreaking show. I think this is a very strong pilot. It's incredible how well and how much it sets up. You know, like I said, we get the first couple scenes, we get their dynamic right away. It's great. They have great chemistry. This show is a huge part of culture for a reason. It influenced tons of shows to come after it. Like I said, I think it established a lot of things, like this was the first show I ever heard the terms mythology episode and monster of the week episode for. This is the first show, even though I was a big Trekkie and the original ship is Kirk and Spock, right? Like the original thing that the birth of fan fiction and everything like that is Kirk and Spock. But this was the first show where I ever heard anybody talking about like a one true pairing with Mulder and Scully and stuff like that. And I definitely think this show had a massive effect on the media landscape. Moving forward, like I said, it was very groundbreaking for the time, the representation of Scully. I had never seen a woman like that on television.
Oh, those shoulder pads. Just walking around like a boss. Fringe would not exist without this show. For
so many shows would, but Fringe, absolutely. Like Fringe, Supernatural, maybe Buffy. Like, I mean, Buffy could maybe have still happened, but like I said, this established a lot of things that would affect culture moving forward. So,
absolutely,
those are my major thoughts. It's a classic for a reason. It's still a great show. If you can get over some 90s visual effects, it holds up. I think at least for the first 5 seasons, it holds up solidly. I would highly recommend it to anybody if you haven't seen it. And it all sounds like your jam.
And, you know, you're always welcome to start with that episode called Home. That's a good jump.
Don't start with Home. If you take anything away from this episode, it should be that unless you're like a huge fan of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, don't start with Home. Even though it does typify this show's use. Another thing that I feel like came from this show was the use of ironic song choice, because this show was the master of contrasting a scary, dark, intense scene with like poppy, you know, music that is contrasting the tone of the scene with how much it is, you know. Home being a great example of that. There's a scene in there, but this show does it the whole way through. The ironic song choice, it was pioneered by the X-Files. Pioneered and possibly perfected, I think, by the X-Files.
Hell yeah. So we can't really predict because we're not doing the whole thing, and also mythology's all spread out. So what can they expect when we cover Beyond the Sea and Humbug?
You're going to get the two sort of polar tonal opposites of this show. Because not Home. We were talking about Home. Not Home. Beyond the Sea. Beyond the Sea is the show at its most both mythology-based, like building of the ongoing conspiracy plot, but also dramatic, emotional, serious. And then Humbug is the show at its monster of the week, goofiest, weirdest David Lynchiest, which this show also loves to do. So you're gonna get basically as far as this show swings, from one tone to the other tone while still staying within its own universe. You're gonna get the opposite ends of the X-Files spectrum.
Hell yeah. And there's a bit of like supernatural, obviously, but like God sort of afterlife stuff happening in Beyond the Sea that they don't really touch on all that often, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, because you get a lot of indication in this show that the universe is more vast and complicated and mysterious than we understand it to be, and a lot more is going on, but it definitely leans more into the paranormal than the supernatural. There's like witches and possessed dolls and shit, so it definitely goes supernaturally too, but it definitely leans more on the side of like aliens, cryptids, weird genetic experiments, you know. And we do get the spirituality of the show in Beyond the Sea.
Spirituality, that's the word I was trying to think of. Yeah.
And that Mulder, for all that he is the representation of faith for the most part on the show, he is the one who wants to believe. He is the believer, Scully is the skeptic. Spiritually, he is the cynic, and she is the believer, which again is the nice sort of nuanced complicatedness of their characters, is that she's the one who believes in, like, God. Yeah. And he doesn't. He believes in every crackpot thing that comes across his every
desk.
Picture of Bigfoot, every, you know, whatever. But he doesn't believe in God, and Scully doubts everything except God. Although there are definitely times when her faith gets tested in the show, as you would think. But
what do you like best about Humbug?
It is the show's sense of humor personified. Yeah. It is all about that quirky, fun weirdness. It is them at their most, like, bantery and quippy with each other. This is well into the point where they are very established, comfortable relationship with each other. But they do give each other a lot of shit out there. And this is like, yeah. It is, I just think it's visually iconic for the show. And it just hits that, like, rompy monster of the week vibes that this show can be in. I'll say my sister, who's also a huge X-Files fan, but she does not like the mythology episodes. She watched it all originally, but she only goes back and basically watches the monster of the weeks. The more That's weird... Funny.
That's kind of how I am with Doctor Who.
Humorous. Yeah. I definitely know people are like that with a lot of shows. You know, they like the fun dip in, dip out episodes where once you know the world, and you know the characters. It's fun to just visit that instead of having to go through these big, dramatic, often painful for the characters' story arcs,
Yeah, I like my hang time, just chilling with my homies.
Right, just the hanging out episodes. And Humbug is absolutely that. But what about you? What do you think about these 2 episodes that we've got coming up next?
I remember the freaks all look really cool, like the jigsaw guy. I remember it's just like chock full of jokes, which I love. Yeah.
And depicts P.T. Barnum as he actually was instead of as like a Hugh Jackman benevolent figure.
Yeah. Yeah, let's put Greatest Showman on the list. For being complete fantasy.
Total fantasy. Speculative to the point of unbelievability. But Hugh Jackman, very charming and hard to pass up.
Oh yeah. Yeah, if the movie was about him, the title I think would be fine.
Yeah, no,
it was about this terrible asshole.
P.T. Barnum, who was a horrible human being, and making him. But you could make a good musical about that, like about who P.T. Barnum actually was. Like Stephen Sondheim's *Assassins* is one of my all-time favorite musicals, and it is about every person who's ever tried to assassinate an American president. Like, you don't have to have a likable lead character to have an interesting musical, but they wanted to make this like cheerful, family-friendly, like, I was like, do not retcon P.T. Barnum like this. Like,
oh man, it's messed up. It's like making Thomas Edison a hero, which they kind of did in the Night of Nikola Tesla, or what? Nikola Tesla's Night of Horrors. Is that the documentary episode? It's a Jodie episode.
Yeah, I have not. Unfortunately, I need to get back in. I have not caught up. I got through I was keeping up through most of the Capaldi, and then I lost my access to it and now I'm so behind that it's just like daunting to catch up, even though I love Jodie Whittaker and I really want to see the Whittaker years, but I have not seen that episode, so I can't tell.
Well, anyway, Thomas Edison's in it. He's kind of a jerk, but in real life he was like a full-on Musk-style jerk.
I mean, very Musk style, in that he made his career off of stealing other people's work, but being better at advertising than they were.
Yes.
So he could make everybody think that it was his work for years. Ironic that Elon Musk chose Nikola Tesla when he is definitely the Edison. And he was like, enough people don't know who Nikola Tesla is. And it's like, yeah, because of dudes like you.
I mean, it's almost like he bought the company as a goof because it had that name. I can't remember if he came first or the name came first. Either way, it's ironic and goofy.
No, I think because he bought the company when it had already existed and they had already developed the first cars. I think it was already called Tesla. In an irony of irony. Oh my God. Once again, history repeating itself. Anyways, thank you for joining us for talking about The X-Files. We'll be back to talk about those 2 episodes, so if you want to watch Beyond the Sea and Humbug before listening to the next episode.
I can't wait to see all of you, metaphorically speaking. We might have a Discord, Facebook, Twitter, all that stuff. We'll see how that goes. But for now, we are just a podcast, I guess. Mm-hmm. Tell your friends, share the website. It's greatandsecretknowledge.libsyn.com. And anything else? Oh, I guess our individual handles. I'm at LFA Tacoma on Mastodon, Blue Sky, Facebook, Twitter. I have Shattered Worlds RPG, and everything is awesome. And that's it for me, Lindsay.
I'm at Lindsay Cameron Nelson, Nelsen on Instagram. I am Noctusphelia on TikTok, and then my other podcasts are Historical Hotties, Cool Breeze Over the Mountains, which is a Keanu Reeves podcast, and The Kurt Locker, which is a Kurt Russell filmography podcast. So you can listen to me on there if this wasn't enough conversation for you with me about media.
Hell yeah. All right. Well, we did it. I can't wait to do it again. Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you.
Thank you, listener. We'll see you all next time when we'll say, I'm looking at all these quotes.
The truth is out there.
Well, the truth is out there. Yeah, that'll work. The
truth is out there. And I want to believe sort of the trademark quotes of the show.
Yes.
But time can't just disappear unless you talk about a show you love for 2 hours, and then it can't.
That's right. We just lost a good 2 hours of our lives.
But we hope that your 2 hours listening to us while you were doing laundry or whatever, that we help make the time disappear.
That's right. Bye.
Bye.
A huge thank you to James Lark at jameslark.com for providing our wonderful theme song. Thank you, James.
So we have a theme song opener, thanks to James Lark. He's finishing up the outro as we speak, and maybe a little incidentals. So I'm pretty excited about it.
Very cool.
Yeah. What'd you think of it?
I told you, I liked it. I liked the, theremin and harpsichord sounds, which are things that are not normally put together, but it gave a nice, sort of uncanny vibe, which I'm very into, so.
Hell yeah. What did he say? Sort of a fantasy cyberpunk?
Yeah.
Which I thought was a fun way to put it. It's like the music inside a clockwork cyborg's head. Something like that. Or what did I say? I said Snow White, the evil queen. What's her name? The Wicked Queen?
I mean, yeah, she's usually just called the Wicked Queen, or the Evil Queen. Sometimes she has a name, but there's not an established, universally agreed upon name for her.
Oh, I think they gave her a name in a movie I didn't watch.
This Snow White and the Huntsman, they gave her a name. Charlize Theron's, I think it was Ravana or something like that, started with an R.
And then Maleficent? Is that from Snow White?
No, that's from Sleeping Beauty, but only the Disney Sleeping Beauty. Yeah. Maleficent is the evil fairy.
A Disney thing. Gotcha.
Yeah. She's not in the Grimm's... I mean, she is, but, she's not named Maleficent in the original fairy tale.
Cool. I am pretty excited to be talking about this thing we're talking about today. So,
you mean evil queen's names? No, we're talking about... It may seem like we're talking about evil queen's names, but we're really talking about X-Files. One of my all-time favorite television shows.